This is the Los Angeles County Homeless Project presentation, examining interagency communication efforts and initiatives. Presenters are Darlene Horn, Department of Mental Health, Katrina Love, Department of Beaches and Harbors, Ed Morrissey, County Council, Rick Alstad, Department of Public Health, and Dimitri Zarkoupas with the Internal Services Department. The homelessness crisis is severe. LA's 2022 homeless count estimated nearly 70,000 persons experiencing homelessness. Unhoused individuals suffer from severe health effects. The life expectancy for women and men in California is 83 and 79 years, respectively. For a recent audit, the average mortality for homeless persons was 48 for women and 51 for homeless men. During the last 5 years, mortality rates have increased by 76% among homeless adults, and almost 40% of unhoused individuals have substance use disorder and are suffering from severe mental illness. Almost 20% suffer from a physical disability. Despite being only 9% of the population, Black people account for 30% of the unhoused. And 26% Latino homelessness is rising faster. At 26%, Latino homelessness is rising faster than any other race. And this year, chronic homelessness grew by 10.2%. And there was a 17% increase in tents, vehicles, and makeshift shelters. 16% are in family units, most often headed by a single mother. So what can we do to help? So the agenda for today's presentation is we will look at the current state of homelessness, first nationally and then in Los Angeles County. Then we will go over the project questions and the methodology that this research group employed. And then we will review the analysis and recommendations of the group and then open it up to questions from our viewers. Next slide, please. So the current state of homelessness nationally is really a result of a number of factors. These factors include stagnant wages, which we will cover later in the presentation, lack of affordable housing, structural racism, and fractured and poorly resourced safety net systems. So here in LA County, we have about 500,000 families without access to an affordable home. Homelessness rises when the rent is 22% higher than the family income. It sharply increases when that ratio is 32%. In LA, the ratio is a staggering 46%. The average market rent rate is $1,988 per month. Renters need to earn at least $38.23 per hour for this to meet affordability standards. However, the minimum wage in Los Angeles County is just $15.96 per hour. So the research group looked at many initiatives, but focused on three funding initiatives used to address homelessness. The first is Prop 63, or the Mental Health Services Act, which was passed in 2004 and imposes a 1% tax on personal income over $1 million. As mentioned previously, a disproportionate number of the unhoused individuals suffer from severe mental illness. We will also focus on Measure H, which was passed in 2017, imposing a quarter-cent county sales tax, raising $355 million annually, and a total of $3.55 billion in 10 years for the life of the measure. And finally, we will look at most recently passed Measure United Los Angeles for those who are Los Angeles City residents. This was passed just this past November, and it imposes a transfer tax on property sales over $5 million, and actually 4% over $5 million and 5% of transfer taxes in excess of $5 million, and raises $923 million annually. However, even with these and other funding measures, a funding gap still exists, and additional permanent supportive housing units, 18,000 permanent supportive housing units, are still needed. So moving on into the ELDP project, we looked at improving interagency communication with persons serving homelessness, and then as a result of our findings and the discussions with our subject matter experts, we actually looked at other areas too of great need and importance. So the project questions we started with were, can this information be consolidated in one location? This would include information related to housing stock, mental health services, wraparound services, and a number of different other data points. Is this information dated? And if so, could there be one agency responsible for keeping the most current information in one place? As will be discussed further, there are numerous county agencies and related entities as well in this space trying to assist the homeless. Number 3, how can information be displayed in a more user-friendly format so that it can be used by community agents and nonprofits? We also looked at more resource-based questions. Are there areas within LA County without significant investment in addressing this issue? And as a result, could investments be redistributed more proportional in terms of where the homeless efforts are needed most? The project methodology that the research team employed is that we identified 9 county departments and 2 non-county agencies operating homelessness efforts and maintaining information and data within Los Angeles County. We developed an interview data tool to identify the homeless initiatives and programs, any databases that were maintained by any of these departments or agencies of their information, how this information was shared, and also externally how this information was shared with social media efforts and any other efforts related to the sharing of information. The results of the interview and data tool were compiled within a large chart and analyzed and formed the basis of the recommendations for the research team in terms of improving interagency communications and homelessness efforts. As I mentioned previously, because so many other themes came up, we also, the research team also focused on some other recommendations that we will be discussing later. Next slide, please. So the departments that we interviewed and related agencies were the Chief Executive Office, the Department of Public Health, Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, LA County Development Authority, the Department of Mental Health, the Sheriff's Department, the Department of Health Services, and the Public Defender. And I might add that we actually did interview a few ELDP participants, our classmates, and we're so grateful for their assistance and keeping their doors open. Next slide. All right, now I'll turn it over to Demetrius.
Hi, everyone. So kicking off into some of the information related to the individuals we spoke with, starting with the CEO and LASA. The CEO being the central administrative arm funded through Measure H and focusing on 6 core pillars: preventing homelessness, subsidizing housing, increasing income, providing case management services, creating a coordinated system, and increasing affordable housing. We also spoke with LASA, as Ed mentioned, and they are the overarching agency overseeing implementation, the programmatic effort, boots on the ground, so to speak, with homelessness. And they focus on 3 core strategies, being outreach, interim housing, and permanent housing. On the data and information side, they maintain a very user-friendly website where individuals seeking services have plenty of resources available. In addition, they maintain what they call CES, which is a coordinated entry system, where data for those individuals seeking services can be inputted, and then whatever they're eligible for can be identified and provided to them. They are currently working on a universal assessment tool that will at least semi-automate that process of intake. Another thing they're looking at is the internal systems that each of the departments they coordinate with maintain, because they want to find a way, although the efforts so far have been sufficient, they want to find a way where all of the data can be accessed in one place. And so they are undertaking work at creating a data warehouse where all of that can be housed in one place. Anyone can readily access it at any time. In terms of funding, LASA is funded 2/3 from Measure H and 1/3 from other sources. historically speaking, the funding allocations per service planning area have been a little imbalanced, more weighted toward the west side, but they've worked hard to rectify that imbalance. Another issue, overarching issue that has come up is NIMBYism, or not in my backyard, which is a challenge when trying to implement housing structures to alleviate encampments in certain areas. And that has historically been a challenge in service planning areas 3 and 7. Lastly is an imbalance with regard to interim housing versus permanent housing, with an overinvestment in interim housing. At current funding levels, only 1 in 5 individuals seeking services are able to be served. And so it begs the question for possible solutions to that. In our research, LASA suggested a 3-pronged approach. The first being piggybacking on current Section 8 program by expanding it. Secondly, allocating more funding toward building additional housing units. And thirdly, implementing a right to housing similar to what exists in Europe. Another department we spoke with was the Department of Mental Health. Their efforts are funded through Measure H and include the federal housing subsidies, housing supportive services, and the home team. I will now pass it over to my colleague, Britt, who will detail additional information from various departments.
Continuing with Department of Health Services, Housing for Health was established in 2012 to establish housing solutions for DHS patients with complex medical and behavioral needs, and also to reduce the costs to the public health system. Measure H allowed DHS to greatly expand this much needed program for more of the county's vulnerable population. Next slide, please. The Department of Public Health has numerous programs operating inter and intra-programmatically to serve the population in need. Notable is Substance Abuse and Prevention Program, which offers intensive management for withdrawal, treatment, and short-term housing placement and recovery support. Environmental health is also a key player, providing shelter and encampment inspections. LACTA, the Development Authority, similar to LASA, is an independent agency and is overwhelmingly federally funded, 70%, of which 63% comes from housing and urban development. Their customers are not only those experiencing homelessness, but apartment owners and nonprofit developers that provide housing. So in addition to the housing units that LACTA provides, they also provide the supportive services needed for those units. The Sheriff's Department is an active participant in the Homeless Initiative with HOST, or the Homeless Outreach Services Team. It's one of the many things that it does, and it educates first responders about the needs of the population served and how to connect them to appropriate services. And they utilize departmental funds as well as Measure H to lead as well as co-lead other department activities. Next slide, please. And the Public Defender provides record expungement via the Criminal Record Clearing Project for people experiencing homelessness at outreach events and also with a mobile unit. So this completes the department and agencies we interviewed, and now I'll hand off to Katrina for our findings.
Thank you, Britt. Now I'll talk about the information consolidation. As we've heard, homelessness is a massive issue, and it's affected by so many things, such as the lack of available and affordable housing, low wages, rising costs, societal and system failures, and politics. But there's no one-stop shop solution. If there was one number or one website folks could visit so that they can get help with everything homelessness, we probably wouldn't have many of the issues that we face today. So based on the information we obtained from the conducted interviews and individual research, we found that the county departments and partner agencies are lacking essential database. When we talk about the feasibility of consolidating all the information into one central database, there's so much of it from so many clients that it will be hard to keep the information regularly updated. As soon as resources come in, they're going to go right back out. Fortunately, we did find that there's good information sharing between the county departments and the partner agencies, both formally and informally. Quarterly reports are supplied by the CEO that are tracking the programs and the funding, and then that information is shared with the Board of Supervisors and also shared with the public. There's information sharing on a number of websites, social media platforms, and client-based software such as the Coordinated Entry System and ArcGIS. There's also information between the various cities throughout the county, a bunch of nonprofit organizations, and a number of committees and coalitions, such as the Housing Central Command, which gets all the partner agencies together so that they can fast track people that are in need of permanent housing and supportive services. So basically, we found that this information system isn't broken because the resources are there and they're accessible, but it could always be improved. So it is our recommendation that LA County invest in one comprehensive system that holds everything related to homelessness. The system must provide real-time data for case management, and it must have the capabilities to track people and resources kind of in the way that we're tracked when we're using our cell phones. The system must be able to provide analytic reports and unique features that will allow us to see how many people are receiving benefits such as CalFresh, or how many people who are seeking housing who have kids or mental health and substance abuse issues. And lastly, the system has to utilize a cloud-based storage system because of the different county departments and partner agencies so that they can collaborate together in the way that we use Teams regarding their various clients. And also, people should be able to remotely access all the data so it won't have to be stored on their computers. With this one system in place, we can improve the flow and accuracy of information to those who are working to combat homelessness. In seeing that there's no urgent issues that plague interagency information sharing, our group went back, we reanalyzed the information that we received when we were looking into this topic. And of the questions we were asking people during our interviews, it just kept coming back to the same thing in regards to homelessness at large. We need more permanent housing and we need more funding. So our group has several recommendations that will aid the county in addressing these deficiencies. To recap the current funding streams, we found that Prop 63, which was approved in 2004 to supply direct mental health services, 1% of the personal income that's over 1 million will go towards those services. One of the largest components of Prop 63 is community services and supports, which has an annual budget of $35 million for housing. Many of those who experience homelessness are mentally ill, so any of that funding will totally go to help those that are unhoused. So in review of Measure H, that one was approved in 2017, and it establishes a 1/4 cent sales to help fight homelessness. The spending plan for Measure H is developed, allocated, and tracked by the CEO, and the funding also helps to pay for interim and permanent housing. In November 2022, voters in the city of LA approved Measure ULA, which establishes a 4% transfer tax on residential and commercial real properties that are valued over $5 million. And the tax is increased to 5.5% for properties that sell over 10 million. The funding will be used to build new constructions and also to rehabilitate existing housing to increase affordable housing for homelessness. So based on review of Prop 63 and Measure H, it is our group's recommendation that the base percentages on those initiatives be increased to provide the vital supportive services and housing to help the homeless. So when you look at Prop 63, Los Angeles has the highest number of millionaires in the state. So increasing the tax to even a mere 0.25% will leave taxpayers unscathed. And the same can be said about Measure H, as it's pennies on the dollar for things that we pay for every day. So in addition to recommending we recommend proposing a ballot that would extend Prop 63, and we recommend that it be extended through 2037. Without this amendment, the prop will end in 2027. So the extra time frame will allow the homeless initiative the time needed to earmark housing developments that are slated for those experiencing homelessness. Our final recommendation is that the county investigate the feasibility of introducing a ballot measure that will impose a similar transfer tax like Measure ULA, but it will include all jurisdictions of the county, not just the city of Los Angeles. So the purpose of the measure would be to track ULA and increase affordable housing to fund homelessness prevention efforts. We think this will be beneficial because if you look at a mansion that's selling for $20 million and based on the current ULA tax rate of 5.5%, the buyer is going to pay $1.1 million, which will go towards homelessness. So this example may not equate to pennies on the dollar, the way I mentioned for Prop 63 and Measure H, but it's just another example of how funds can be raised to help homelessness. So to accomplish these recommendations, voter approval is needed on the state and local levels, and we recommend that the CEO work with county departments and the county's legislative staff to determine the best path forward. So these are our recommendations, and on the next slide, we invite any questions that you guys may have. So thank you so much for listening to our presentation.